For centuries, English law rested on a single assumption. The king stood above judgment itself. That was the foundation. That was the only political reality England had ever known. Then January 1649 arrived, and something happened that its entire legal and spiritual framework said was impossible. It arrested its king, wrote up charges, assembled a court, and when the verdict came back, it scheduled an execution. Now the question is how any of this became conceivable in the first place. England in the 1640s was a country where every conversation carried a second meaning, where loyalty was performed rather than felt, where men in Parliament smiled at the king's representatives and voted against the king the following morning. Charles had ruled for about 2 decades, long enough to believe he understood the game, long enough to stop questioning whether the people around him still believed what they claimed to believe. The court still functioned, but the energy inside those rooms had shifted in ways that don't show up in official records. Advisors started choosing words more carefully. Letters took longer to arrive. Certain conversations stopped happening in front of certain people. Power has a particular effect on information. The more absolute it appears, the less honest information reaches the person holding it. Charles received reports. He received assurances. What he stopped receiving was the truth about how far his support had actually eroded. He was surrounded by protocol, by men who needed him to remain confident so they could remain comfortable. And somewhere inside that arrangement, the first fracture appeared. In the growing distance between what Charles believed was happening and what actually was. The Civil War didn't begin with a single betrayal. Parliament had been pushing against royal authority for years, over taxation and religion. Charles had responded the way men who believe in their own authority always respond. He waited for the opposition to exhaust itself. By 1642, the arguing had become armies, 2 sides, 2 visions of what England was supposed to be. And Charles, who had spent his entire reign convinced that God had placed him above political negotiation, found himself doing the one thing sacred monarchy was never designed to do: fight for its own survival. The early campaigns gave him reason for confidence. His forces weren't losing. Parliament hadn't broken him. There were still events where this ended in his favor. The Battle of Naseby didn't just defeat Charles militarily, it exposed something worse. His private correspondence was captured. Letters between the king and foreign Catholic powers. Parliament published them. Whatever reservoir of public sympathy Charles still held began draining that year. He spent the following months moving between allies who were running out of reasons to protect him. The Scots handed him over to Parliament in exchange for payment. The army took him from Parliament when it decided Parliament was moving too cautiously. He was shifted between men who wanted to use him and men who hadn't yet decided what to do with him. Through all of it, Charles maintained his composure in public. That part is worth noting. He didn't visibly fracture. He wrote letters. He prayed. He continued to carry himself as a king. But the world making decisions around him had stopped treating him like one. And the gap between how Charles understood his own position and the reality that was being constructed around him had grown wide enough that no negotiation was going to close it. The army had already decided. It just hadn't announced it yet. The trial lasted 7 days. Charles appeared each session in the same black clothing. He carried himself with the posture of a man who had decided, somewhere before the proceedings began, that recognition was the only weapon he had left. He refused to enter a plea, because entering a plea meant acknowledging that the court possessed authority over him, and that the surrender of that single principle was the one thing he would not do. The judges proceeded without his cooperation. 68 of them signed the death warrant. Some hesitated. Some needed convincing. One reportedly had his hand forced onto the paper. The mechanics of that moment have been analyzed for centuries. What it produced was a single document that converted a political crisis into a scheduled event. January 30th, 1649. The scaffold had been built outside the banqueting house at Whitehall. Charles had commissioned the painted ceiling inside that building himself, a celebration of divine monarchy, of kings appointed by heaven. He walked past it on his way out. The morning was cold. He had asked for an extra shirt, concerned that shivering might be mistaken for fear. That detail has survived every account of that day. A man facing execution, managing how the moment would be interpreted. He placed his head on the block himself. The crowd that witnessed what followed went in a way that witnesses struggled to describe afterward. Something that didn't have a clean name. England didn't celebrate. The men who had signed the warrant went in the weeks that followed. Some stopped appearing in public spaces they had previously occupied without hesitation. Conversations about what had happened were careful, measured, stripped of anything that might be interpreted as enthusiasm or regret. The crowd that had witnessed the executions dispersed without the energy of people who believed they had won something. Parliament had removed a king. It had not yet figured out what replacing one looked like. The silence that settled over London in those weeks was a population that had watched something irreversible happen and hadn't yet decided how to feel about the fact that they had allowed it. That uncertainty didn't resolve. It just got buried under what came next. Charles was dead within seconds of the axe falling. The argument his execution started took considerably longer. For the first time in English history, a sitting monarch had been removed by a legal process, however contested, constructed by his own subjects. That meant authority had come from somewhere other than the crown. The question was where? Parliament spent the next decade trying to answer that. So did the revolutions that followed across the next 2 centuries, in France, in America, across the world.